You are watching East Tennessee's first and only year-round sports talk show on television. This is The Sports Source with your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning and welcome into The Sports Source. Glad to have you with us today. Big game to talk about last night. 29-21, Missouri defeats Tennessee. Third straight time they've beaten Tennessee since joining the SEC. Tennessee shouldn't feel so bad. Missouri's 13-2 the last 2 years in the East. We'll break down the game. We'll talk about Tennessee's breakdowns. Where was that game lost? We'll discuss it all and plenty more. A lot of controversial topics this week, and we'll tackle those as well. First segment of our show always brought to you by the folks Phil Cobble, Fine Homes and Land. Are you tired of waiting for your home to sell? Then turn your listing over to Phil and his team. They use every technology to market your home, just like this show right here. The next couple of weeks, I want to tell you about this 7-acre lakefront estate on beautiful Melton Hill Lake. Yet another of the beautiful homes Phil Cobble and his team handle in West Knox County, Loudoun, and Blount counties. Look at that thing, gorgeous. Phil Cobble, Fine Homes and Land, that's the group to call if you're waiting on your home to sell or if you're interested in buying a home. Give them a call. Find out for yourself why they've been so successful over the last 30 years in East Tennessee. All right, let's tell you what we do have coming up on the show today. There are your headlines. Missing who? Who was it? Tennessee was missing a lot of players. Who did they miss the most? We'll talk about how Tennessee lost the game. Tough call on the offsides on the onside kick. We'll debate that thing. Suspensions were handed out. We'll talk about Butch Jones' discipline. Yesterday's action around the league and with the UT, has that changed anybody's views on Dobbs, Butch Jones, etc.? Got some complaining to do. We'll also tackle the Little John controversy, and Chuck Cavaleris will set the Cavaleris line for Vanderbilt, a game that Tennessee needs to win in Nashville to go bowling. All right, every Sunday morning I need these guys. Bob Hodge, freelance contributor to the Knoxville News Sentinel. Will Overstreet, former Vol defensive end, former NFL defensive end. Jimmy Himes, host of Sports Talk on Sports Radio, WNML 990 and 99.1. I should be paid for that. And Chuck Cavaleris down there from Tennessee Golf Central. All right, guys, Missouri beats Tennessee for the third straight time since joining the league, as I said. They've now won 10 in a row on the road. They've won 8 in a row on the road in the SEC. So that's not a bad loss, but then when you factor in the missing last night, I mean, it was like a movie. You had Brian Randolph out for the first half. You had A.J. Johnson and Mike Williams suspended from the team. Matt Crowder was out hurt. Marquez North could have been put on that movie poster as well. He was out. A school record 7 true freshman starters last night. All right, I know any loss is disappointing for the fan base. Understood. How disappointed should people be in that one last night, considering what you went into it with roster-wise?
I don't think they should be really disappointed. I mean, look, Missouri's a ranked team. They're in the top 20. They lead the East Division. They are headed to the SEC championship game if they can beat Arkansas. And when you take those 7 players out, not 7, you had 7 true freshmen, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When you take out the players you mentioned that are really good, I took Missouri because I didn't think Tennessee could overcome the loss of those. And many times you want to be strong up the middle in most sports, right?
Yeah.
You're at your center, your middle linebacker, and your safety. I just thought it was tough odds for Tennessee to overcome to beat Missouri.
I mean, also, if you looked at the schedule a few weeks ago, this was going to be the game if you were going to struggle and probably lose a game. This was the game.
We pointed to it on the big board over there, yeah.
They had a great defensive line, and they have a great front seven. This is the type of game that you were worried about for Tennessee just because you're not as good on the offensive line, and you knew in this kind of matchup they were going to be able to exploit that weakness. And just overall, this is a better team right now. Missouri has a better team. To win this game, they were going to have to play down, and you were going to have to play your best game. That's not what happened.
Well, and I would say this too, even if Missouri, they're going to have a hard time with Arkansas next week.
Mm-hmm.
Arkansas is playing well, but Arkansas won't be playing with 7 true freshmen. So if they do beat them, Tennessee Butch Jones has done more with youth than any coach in the country this year. It's kind of amazing when you consider just how much youth they've played. Going into yesterday's game, I think if you'd asked most people, what's the biggest loss in terms of these guys that aren't going to be there, they would have said A.J. Johnson. I think they missed Matt Crowder more than they missed A.J. Johnson last night. That offensive line, we'd said Dobbs deserved a lot of credit, but clearly now that offensive line had made some strides because when you took one guy out who called the protections, that thing went backwards last night on the offensive
line looked like the offensive line we had talked about all the way up until when Dobbs started playing. And I'll tell you something else. The first half, they missed Randolph. because if you sit there and you look, there's a couple of missed tackles that could have gotten Missouri off the field. And I'm not saying I don't know where the safety should have been, but the safety was not close. The safety missed one of those tackles. And so I thought that Randolph in the first half, even if it had just been one play, would have made a big difference. So you can add him in there too, that was a bigger loss than I thought it would be for just a half.
Yeah, and I thought the disappointment was, mainly how the offense played. You played well enough at times to be able to do something. It's 13-13. Then you had the turnovers in the second half. Unable to protect Dobbs.
Yep.
He looked more like, well, maybe he's not that great, but it's not just him. He never really had a chance.
He didn't get a lot of help last night.
Yeah, I know, but that's what
we said about Worley all year.
And Missouri, people need to appreciate that's a good football team. They've got, first-round NFL talent on that defensive line. And you look at what they've done, I think that's what a lot of Tennessee fans don't appreciate.
I think it's all across the SEC. I just think Missouri's not a traditional football program, power, I should say.
Yeah.
And I think that, we'll talk about it, but you can make a real strong case that the most underrated coach in the country over the last decade has been Gary Pinkel at Missouri, because all they do is win.
One thing interesting, too, you know when the last time Missouri won a conference championship?
That's amazing. I know the stat.
1969. It's been a while. But this is a good football
But
team.
that's true, but the fact that he got them to 3 Big 12 championship games, look at the 20 years before he got there, and that was one of the worst programs.
And John, real quick, too, it is a veteran football team. And that makes it even worse when you're playing all these young players.
I thought that you looked at Dobbs, and there was some thought that he wasn't feeling the pressure as well last night, that he didn't make as good of decisions. I think you look at it, you're getting pressure up the middle last night. We had the stunts and twists, and we'll talk a little later with David Liggett about that. Stunts and twists confused him up the middle. You had faster defensive ends that pinned him in. Yep. There was no escape route for Dobbs last night, which you had against South Carolina, which you had against Kentucky, which you had against Alabama, because they had prepared for Nathan Peterman and an offense that you hadn't run since Worley went out. You take that into effect, take the running game out, have some drops. I walked out of that not feeling so bad about Dobbs personally.
I really thought the interception, the Malone interception, I thought that was the key play. That was the key of the whole game. And when you come back to it, a lot of people that I was sitting with in the stand said Dobbs threw it behind him. Well, he had both hands on the football, and you're supposed to make that catch. But I thought the biggest thing in the second half, I went back to what I was doing in the first few games. I started counting from the snap, how much time did he have? Of course, this is not scientific. But usually you didn't get to 2 before he had somebody that was giving him a problem. And I just don't think you can play that well like that.
And it wasn't just the pressure on him, but when he made a move, there weren't any holes.
To go.
Everybody, they had guys stacked in there, and they were playing a complete pass rush game, which is they knew their responsibility, and they weren't just beating a guy and getting outside or getting out of position. They were always in the box in position.
They're a fast defense. They tackle extremely well. Yeah. They got guys like Golden who are incredibly intelligent. You looked at the screen pass. He's coming at the quarterback. He senses something's not right here, backs off, makes the tackle on the screen. That's a good defense. Chuck, the other thing, Tennessee didn't have a chance to take many shots downfield because Missouri was sitting over the top saying, we're going to give you underneath, and that's it.
Yeah,
so there weren't a lot of opportunities.
I've seen some of the criticisms. Boy, it wasn't a very creative game plan, but it was almost like you had Justin Worley back there again with no time to throw. Yeah. But, you still, I think you need to try something, and you weren't even really able to get Jalen Hurd going. Yeah. What did he have, 11 times? But he didn't really, same way with him.
I look at it, we said it last week, we say it every week, media, fans, we all do this. Win a game, great game plan. Lose a game, terrible game plan. I think part of it's execution. And Tennessee
didn't take advantage of field position.
True, much like the Florida game.
To do that, yeah.
Well, and let's just face it, we've said this a number of times. You look at pro quarterbacks, you look at great college quarterbacks. They all look mediocre when they're getting hit a lot.
Yeah. Very good. All right. When we come back, we'll talk about offsides on that onside kick. What's the rule? We got confusion here on the desk. We'll talk about that. And as a matter of fact, we'll also we'll talk about the decision by Butch Jones and UT to suspend a couple of players very quickly this week. What does that show for the program moving forward? Come on back on the Sports Source.
Want your own man cave? Turn to Benedict Construction.